One local developer says new apartment construction has slowed down already this year, and they are projecting an apartment shortage in Seattle as early as next year if the demand stays the same. This means potentially higher rent in a market already expensive. We spoke with the CEO of Wallace Properties. Here are portions of my conversation with Kevin Wallace. Mr. Wallace, your family-run development company has been around since the 70s, with your dad starting it, you taking over since 2004. Now, your company has built some notable apartment buildings in Seattle, such as the Citizen in the Capitol Hill neighborhood and the Eddy in Green Lake. I share that background because that means you have seen the ups and downs of the construction industry. What is your latest forecast when it comes to apartment availability, specifically for renters in Seattle?
Well, the last 12 months or so, maybe even longer than that, it's been quite the renter's market. There's been a huge supply of new apartments, and the rent levels have actually stayed flat or even dropped in recent past. And that's about to change because we've had the supply wave that we've had over the last few years has come to an end. And now as we look into 2026, there's going to be very little new deliveries. And so the buildings that completed construction this year and last year are basically getting leased up.
That potentially means rent increases. So what are some of the main reasons why we're seeing a shortage of apartment construction?
A lot of it has to do with the interest rates. The Fed raised the Fed funds rate back in 2022 by, on a percentage basis, the largest increase it's ever had in the history of the country. And that really pulled all the air out of the balloon for development.
What can city leaders do outside of the interest rates? Because that's something that they cannot control. But what can city leaders do immediately to make a difference in this?
Yeah, I mean, the interest rates are part of the federal government's control. What they can control is insurance costs and interest rates, and they haven't done a very good job of trying to bring down either. With the city and state, it's a different matter. That you're really looking at the building codes and the processes, the time it takes to get a permit in the cities, the regulatory burdens that are being heaped on development that really were placed on development over the last 5 years or 10 years when interest rates were low and those new burdens could be absorbed. Now the interest rates are higher, they really can't. And so taking a look at, are all those regulations that were heaped onto development in the last decade necessary, or are there ways to have reasonably sustainable buildings that are not harmful to the environment, but without such an amazingly expensive load on the cost of construction for things that, in my view, are not really necessary for a livable apartment or an environmentally friendly one.
Is the permitting process too slow in Seattle?
Well, as compared to Eastern Washington or other large cities, yes. And this is not unique to Seattle. Most of Western Washington, the larger cities, the permit process has just become so cumbersome that it's difficult for the developers and the city staff to work through the process. And what should take a year takes two or three.
You may know, but the Seattle City Council, in a 5-3 vote, just approved to increase the cost of permitting for most construction projects by 18%. Council President Sarah Nelson, who was one of the members to vote no on this price hike, calls it a regressive tax, with small to mid-sized construction paying even more in some cases. So in your opinion, what's going to be the impact from this recent hike?
Well, in my experience, for larger projects like the ones that Wallace Properties focuses on, 100 units or more, the permit costs are not going to be a pivotal factor. Where I think you'll see more of a challenge from that kind of increase is with smaller projects, townhome projects, small apartment buildings, because the budgets are so much smaller. When you have similar fixed cost increase like that, it just makes it all the more difficult to pencil the project.
Seattle City Council passed that 18% increase in construction and permit fees in late November, and that hike will go into effect next year. As you just heard, Wallace believes the largest developers will be able to manage that 18% increase in construction in Seattle, but says it will be a challenge for mid-size and smaller developers.